Welcome to the Trade Up Podcast. This is episode 13. I'm Lisa Brandt, John Finance's co-author of the book, Trade Up, Why Buy a Job When You Can Start a Career? Jim McNally's route to a skilled trade is pretty unusual, if not unique. Jim's a pretty well-known stand-up comic, but these days he's a licensed electrician. He's also the son of an electrician. He's got great stories in the trades about himself, his dad, and his kids, and it turns out he and John Finan have a lot in common.
You turned 60 this year, so I did as well. And it's a whole new world being 60, having kids that are grown and getting into the workforce. But let's go back to your beginning into the trades. You're an electrician, and I know you have a side career. So tell us a little bit about how you got into the trades and what you've been doing to keep yourself busy after work.
I come from a long line of electricians. My dad was an electrician. My uncle's an electrician. My cousin's an electrician. I decided to break from family tradition. I've been a stand-up comic since the 80s. And I traveled extensively throughout Canada and the States, and I did comedy, and it's Canadian comedy. So it's like the Witness Relocation Program. You can do it for 30 years and no one ever knows who you are. So, but my whole career path was centered around arts and creativity and that kind of thing, performance and, acting and that kind of thing. And then I'm introduced to stand-up. A very good friend of mine who is actually a writer for Rick Mercer. His name's Rick Curry. He's the guy who said, well, you're an idiot, Jim. Why don't you give this a shot? So I did.
He recognized himself in you. Had a boy.
Yeah. And I went on to I had a fantastic career in comedy it's a great party for the first, but you get in your 30s and you're realizing, well, the Tonight Show's not calling, and you get stuck in this. It's great. It's a great career to be 20 in, and then when you get old and you realize, I kind of like to have a house, and I kind of like to have a decent car, and these guys I hang around with are great, but I don't. You got to go grow up, and I had been given a job through a friend of my father. My father was pretty well known here back in the day in the Ottawa Valley. And I was up here, and a gentleman he helped hounded me to get an apprenticeship. He tried, and I was working for him. He had an electrical company, and he was.
What year was this?
This would be, in the 2000s, I guess.
Okay. So things are rocking. I started my business in 94 and things were dead, but by 2000 it was going gangbusters. So I get why he would want, because he was looking for anybody with a heartbeat. You can entertain the rest of the guys when you're standing around. Okay.
Part of the thing was, I had done electrical work a lot with my dad. So it was kind of like, when you're a kid, sure, you don't want to work with your dad. I knew kind of what I was doing, and I understood what had to get done. And I'm really grateful for him, because he eventually, he kept bugging me to the point where eventually, I'm not the brightest guy in the world. The light bulb went off, and it was like, hey, they're going to pay you to get this ticket. You're going to be educated and employed at the same time. And it's also the type of trade where if I needed to go away to do a show somewhere, it was okay, as long as they had.
The wire was still waiting for you when you got back.
Yeah, and as long as they knew, they were great, and it was fantastic. And they did that, and it provided for me at that point a very stable financial place where I could feel safe, and then it took the pressure off what I was doing for my comedy, and I started to excel at comedy because there was no pressure. It didn't matter.
Right.
If I didn't get work, I still could pay my rent. I still could pay my bill.
Yeah. So let's go back to high school. You finished high school? Did you go to college, university, or did you just hit the road in the open mic nights? And
I went to college. I finished high school. I went to a pre-media course in Algonquin College up here in Ottawa, where I wanted to be a radio, television disc jockey, entertainer kind of thing. I didn't know what I wanted to do. And this was an introduction to radio broadcasting. So I went there, and then the next year I didn't go back, and I started doing some street theater many years ago. I did street theater in Ottawa a long time ago. And that led to improv. And in amongst this, I had jobs, regular jobs. And then I started doing stand-up in Ottawa in, I guess the mid 80s.
Are you by chance the youngest in your family?
I am.
Okay. How many siblings you got?
5.
You and I share that in the sense that we're the youngest, which means when you tell me that at 18, you're ready to get in front of a microphone, stand up in front of people. That tells me that, hey, you got a lot of confidence and you're a super sharp guy, which also tells me the youngest.
And a severe lack of career planning, too.
You know what I tell anybody that I run into that's in the same situation as you, as I said, okay, I know that you're the youngest. What that means is you're the funniest. Yeah. And the fact that you're the funniest means you're the smartest.
Well,
everybody knows
funny, haha, and there's funny.
Yeah. But you don't always make wise. Smart people don't always make wise decisions. So you did this till you're 30, but you said something earlier, like you finally had to grow up. Well, most of us know that no, men don't actually ever need to grow up, but we do need to pay the bills, and that's about the time that I kind of caught on to, hey, better actually make some money, because in your case, you had the microphone to attract the women, but I had nothing. I was broke and no job skills, and I owed a lot of money to the government for the education that I didn't actually stay to complete. So you get into the trade and you're working and doing it as a side gig. That's awesome.
Well, they say like a sense of humor might be attractive to women. However, they don't necessarily want to date it. So, I got an amazing wife right now. She tolerates my humor. That's
good. Yeah, mine's the same. She nods. She tolerates it, but I get it. So did you ever work with your dad?
Yes, actually, I did quite a bit. Not officially. I was interested when I was younger. I was interested in it as a kid, and then and Dad had a business up here, and you just got drawn along, and and I was, I guess 10, 11, 12, that, you'd be the kid picking up the scrap wire, or you'd be sweeping the floor, that kind of stuff. And then, of course, you get into your teens, and then that's just the most uncool thing ever. You don't want to be around that at all. And his career had changed too. He ended up selling his business. Well, in the 70s, he actually got into some financial issues and it was a really slow time then. And he ended up getting out of the business and going into a lot of consulting and a lot of that kind of stuff. He was overseas, doing jobs overseas and that kind of thing. And so it wasn't really an option. And at that point, I was pretty well on a different path for what I wanted to do. Yeah. I was doing other things.
Well, I interviewed my son is 28, and he had a career started off in banking, didn't like it, got into truck driving. That wasn't as lucrative as it appeared to be. And then wanted to get into the trade. So the first thing we did was talked about sort of, how did you end up not getting into the trade? And he said, Dad, you were, sitting at dinner one time and you grabbed a napkin and wrote out how, if I didn't go to university, and you gave me all the RASP money that you'd saved up, because that's what I would have done, and buy a house. And I showed him how he'd be $250,000 ahead by the time all of his buddies finished university or college or something. And he said, dinner was done. I wiped my mouth with the napkin, threw it in the garbage, and I went on to make a bunch of bad decisions, essentially. Mm-hmm. So I guess that's what we do as kids. But you raise a good point about your dad. So he's an electrician, has lots of experience, but he was able to, with the failure of a business, I think that's probably pretty demoralizing, financially tough, but didn't sound like it kept him down at all. He immediately got a job, and in fact, he probably went overseas and made way more money.
Well, he ended up, he went overseas. He was a character. He was the old school electrician, and ate poorly, drank too much, and smoked cigarettes constantly. And he was out, the tar sands were going, and he was out there for a while doing some stuff, and then he was in Cornwall when the sea wave was big. He was down there. And then he did do a thing. I think he was in Iran when the Shah was overthrown, and they had to get him out of there. Like, he had amazing stories. So, he was just one of those guys. And it's always, how it is when you run with guys, it's you take care of the crew and they take care of you, Yeah. And he was so good with the guys he worked for. They actually helped him get away from get out of there, and he took care of them, and they took care of him, and they kind of and the guys that he had been working with liked him so much they kind of got him out of there before he got in trouble. So
actually, you talked about something that kind of is probably, and no offense to your dad, because he had 5 kids, raised them, went all over Canada, the province, the world to raise them, but there's this thought that you become a tradesperson because sort of that's what you fail into, and you're hard drinking, hard smoking, all the other bad stuff that goes on with it. But that's not the case. Guys like you and me that are electricians, I'm an electrician as well, still working at 60. You got to take care of your body. And what that means is you can't do a lot of that bad stuff. There's not enough of those role models out there for the young people.
It was a different time too. You played hard and that kind of stuff, but it's a really different environment now. Having spent the better part of 30 years entertaining in bars, it's different now. And the guys coming up that I see coming in, the company I'm working with right now, they just signed a couple of young men who are I want to be an electrician. There's no question. They saw the opportunity and they are motivated to learn about everything they possibly can. And they're coming to the older guys because they want to learn how to work and they want to do things. So I think there's a big shift happening. People are starting to realize that this is a very valuable skill to have. You got to take care of yourself. There's nobody on site. Well, the last site I was on, there was one guy probably out of a 30 that smoked, which is a total, as you would know, back in the day, that was they're drinking energy drinks, they're going to the gym. So it's a real different shift. And I think also the work has changed quite a bit. Having the electrical ticket has helped me do many different things. I got to do a lot of solar stuff. I had my own business for a while and I sold it. And I was in between work and I worked with a company and I managed solar powered traffic control systems like traffic lights and message boards. And the tech involved was amazing. I had a laptop that I can control over 150 boards and signboards with and traffic lights and that kind of stuff. And it was all solar powered. And we had to manufacture these things. We modify them to the point where they would run for at least 7 days with nobody laying a hand on them. So you drive by this stuff and it's a sign or a traffic light by a bridge that's being under construction. You don't realize the amount of tech in there. So that was fascinating. I learned a lot about solar. I learned a lot about batteries and that kind of thing. And then also using computers and software to work these things and make them, control them. So that was something that was a direct result of me having electrical experience. That wouldn't have happened if I had. And it was a fascinating job. And, I did that for a couple of years and then got offered back on the tools doing regular electrical work. And I've done everything from residential to I was in the Arctic for a while, doing a job at a high tech. We're working right now at Ericsson, doing some work in there. So the whole thing is it's not just pulling wire and wiring up plugs anymore. It can be, but there's so many different ways you can go. And even at my age, at 60, I still have opportunities. Like there's still things I can go into at this age where at 60, you don't think you have a lot of options. But
I totally agree with you. And when we were originally, my co-writer and I, Lisa, wrote our book on getting into the trades, and the arc that I wanted the characters to have was personal growth, of course, but I also wanted them to see people that had been in the trades and had done things that were what you wouldn't think is just being on the tools. Because quite frankly, most of us are not on the tools from the time we're 25 till we're 60. We're doing other things. And Trade Up was the name we came up with because number one, the trades, but secondly, it's exactly the way your career goes. You're going to take today's skills and apply them to the technologies and the opportunities of tomorrow. And to your point about solar, that's exactly, we're putting a solar system on our house in the next couple of weeks. We're going to put in a heat pump system to replace the gas furnaces. And these are things that we wouldn't have dreamed about. I certainly wouldn't have thought about 10 years ago. And it's a real game changer. But even just getting off of the tools and out of the trade, the whole supply chain, when you think about your dad, I'm sure was doing some consulting work, which is essentially what we do as journey people anyway. We just take the knowledge we have and pass it down to the next group of kids coming behind us. And that can continue on. And frankly, the pressure for you to keep working. In fact, I talked to a facility we do a bit of work at, and the guy that runs that facility is retiring, as he said, in 17 days. And I said, they'll call you back. They have to keep him away for a month. And then after that, his phone's going to ring and they will pay him, I'm certain, the same amount of money for 1.5 days of consulting that they pay him for his full-time job because he knows tons. And he's our age. He's 60. He can run that gig forever. But anyway, you've got a son that's in the trades and you've got a daughter that went sort of more the traditional debt-based education route. And are you happy to share a little bit of their journey with us?
Yeah, sure. Michael, smart kid, did his school thing, and then he wasn't sure where he wanted to head out. He was cooking. He's a fabulous cook. He's a very good cook. And he was cooking in a kitchen, and he was just getting, he was people who work in kitchens, it's grueling. And the shifts were just unbelievable.
Yep.
And he just said, Dad, I think I want to be one of those guys on the construction crew drinking beer on the patio on Friday. He didn't think, I don't know what I have to offer. I said, well, you've been running a kitchen for 3 years. Yeah. You know how to manage people. You know how to do things. And so it's wonderful to see those skills that he learned doing that job, which at the end was very grueling. He got into this company, and you want to talk about starting on the bottom, but the kid's got a work ethic like you wouldn't believe. He was out there in his early 20s And, he's out there slugging, and he was working. He'd come home and covered in concrete oil and dirt and garbage. And now he's this guy who he helped build. They got him on a crane. He started running a crane. He started putting out they were putting 10 pieces a day out. He upped it to 25. He's now brought a crew in. He's trained the crew. This is a kid I'm telling him, look, you're going to be in management before long. I mean, 'cause he's just that kind of kid. And the trades, the construction trades that he's in, that he's learned, has given him that room to grow,
Right. Yeah. And I don't think there's too many jobs where you're literally thrown into a position of great responsibility early on. And when I think about all the things that go on job sites, I mean, let's face it, the crane is probably one of the most complicated and dangerous pieces of equipment around, and it's got to be done right. So is he one of the guys that can sit up in the crane and operate and bring things to the 13th floor and that sort of?
Well, from what I understand, like these guys are in a factory setting, but what he does is some of these pipes are 15 feet in diameter. They're huge, massive sewer pipes. So there's a massive crane that he runs. It's a gantry crane, and it picks up these forms, and they flip them over, and they do all kinds of stuff. He's shown me pictures of it, and he, of course, would be better at explaining it than myself. But it's a very dangerous position to be in, because they build a form, they pour the cement in, and then these guys strip the form off. So you pull the form out. You're working a crane, and they're pulling off forms and stuff. So you got people around. You really have to have a guy who knows what he's doing.
Yeah, no doubt.
He did this. He trained another guy how to do it, and he's been now he's running the crew, and he's coming to me, and telling me how the hardest part of any job is managing people. Those are the talks we have now.
That's cool. I'll tell you a funny crane story, and two interesting things. I whenever I get asked by young people, about trades, one of the questions they'll ask is, who gets paid the most? And I said, well, the two jobs that I think pay the most are commercial refrigeration guys and elevator mechanics, or people that do hoisting devices. And I said, and there's a reason for that, because they don't call you to fix refrigeration equipment when you want to go to work. It's when it breaks down and it needs to be done in an emergency, which oftentimes is the middle of the night. And the crane operator work, that's physically hard work and dirty work, but nothing prepares somebody better to do that kind of work than being 21 to 25, when their superpower is their ability to work hard and be strong. But my wife and I bought a house a number of years ago, and the bell technician comes in and he's hooking up the equipment, and we got chatting, and it turns out that he just bought a house a couple of years before that in Hilton Head, North Carolina. So he likes to go down there and golf. I just started my business, and I'm like, wait a second, you work for Bell Canada and you own a place in Hilton Head? And he said, oh yeah, I paid off my house a long time ago. He was working for Bell early in his career, and I was actually a crane operator by training, and left that to go to Bell. And Bell goes on strike, and his former boss calls up and said, hey, we got a big project and we're way behind. We need a crane operator, and we're paying a ridiculous amount of money. And he said, well, I might as well do that and forego my strike wages and go work on this crane. So he works on the crane for, I don't know, let's say a month and a half, 2 months, not forever. And then Bell calls and he got to go back to work. But he'd earned enough money to actually pay off his mortgage. But here's what he did. He didn't tell his wife. We keep secrets from our wives, but this was an interesting one he kept. So he goes into the bank, he pays off the mortgage. And his wife was actually paying mortgage. My wife and I did this ourselves. So you pay every month. You pay your mortgage off in 25 years. But if you pay it off every 2 weeks, you pay it off in 17 years. But if you really want to get aggressive, you pay every week. Now, it doesn't actually make very much difference, except you're paying your mortgage every week, which for us was a hassle because my wife got paid once a month. And at the time I started my business, she was the only one that actually made any money. So anyway, this fellow's wife actually paid the mortgage, and it goes on for 2 or 3 years. And he hasn't told, she just deposits in the bank account. So she's not really technically paying the mortgage. But anyway, money goes to the bank account every week. And then something happened and she was not going to be able to get the money in time. So she goes into the bank to say, hey, I'm going to be 3 days late with my mortgage payment. And the bank person says, when you could go talk to tellers, mortgage, you don't have a mortgage. So of all the uncomfortable conversations that you have to have with your wife about stupid things you do with money, I think that was probably a pretty good conversation when she went home to find out that he'd paid off the mortgage several years ago and they'd saved all this money. And probably that's what paid for the house in Hilton Head, North Carolina. So
my God, anyway,
yeah. So, well, good for your son. So he got into the trade, and then your daughter did something different.
So yeah, my daughter went to university. As I was saying, we were very much get a good education, you get a good job. You go to university, you're going to get a good job. And she got 2 degrees. She got one degree. They said, well, you got a better chance of getting a job and getting another degree. She got another degree and could not find work. She applied to be in the police services at one point. She was just in degrees are in environmental studies. She's a specialist on birds. She knows a lot about birds. And I know I'm probably saying that wrong, so I'm sure I'm going to screw that up. But
ornithologist.
Well, kind of, but with an environmental, it's amazing what she knows about the environment and animals and that kind of stuff, and making her sound way more uneducated than she is. But the only way she could move ahead was to become a teacher. Of course, because she had 2 degrees, they could kind of had a crash course, and she took a 2-year course, and they gave her teaching certificate. And now she's a teacher, and she's a fabulous teacher. And I mean, you find where you're supposed to be too. I mean, but it was frustrating for her, as it would be for a lot of people, where they're, in our generation especially, was told, you go to university, you're gonna do well, guaranteed.
Yeah.
There's no guarantee anymore. You can have 2-3 degrees and not work.
At some point, I think kids have just started to get wise to that, because I think the enrollment rates for kids in Ontario anywhere are dropping. And certainly young men are not going to university to the degree that they were years ago. They're going, why would I go to university to have a debt-based education when I can start earning money in, the trade or something similar right away?
And the thing, too, that the trades are not a dirty word anymore. They were a dirty, you're a tradesman. You're a tradesman. Having started in the trade later on in life, there was a lot of friends I had who had at that time been in corporate for a long time and sitting at a desk behind a computer, which is, there's nothing wrong with, but they were telling me, I want to go be an electrician. I want to go be a plumber. I don't want to sit behind a desk anymore. And it's interesting when you go into places, some of the offices we work in, I'm like, man, I'm just glad that's not my reality. I'm 60. I'm still running up and down ladders. I'm running around. I'm carrying rolls of BX around. And I mean, it keeps you young, and it's still, my mind is working good. I mean, well, people would probably debate that. But
Well, just remember, Jim, the whole idea of an apprentice is they carry the wire. So you don't have to, you still have to climb the ladder, but get that roll of 150 meters of 12.2 BX for me, young fella or young lady, and get it over here on the.
Well, the thing is now it's a pride thing, because it's like, well, take the wire from the old man. I'll carry that. I'll show you kids who can carry the roll of BX.
That's right. Back in my day, it was up and down the ladder, was up and both ways. There was no down the ladder, only up the ladder. So, there's a couple of T-shirts I've started to see around, not just on job sites, but at stuff. And I think it must be a brand. It's called Dirty Job, Clean Money. Yeah, and it's getting to be kind of cool. It's good, and young women too, to get into the trades. It's starting to be something that we're seeing a lot more of.
I've worked with women who are incredibly smart and know their job very well, and there's none of this. They're treated equally. They're treated like I treat them like electricians, and a lot of times they know a heck of a lot more of what's going on than I do.
The younger generation definitely do. They take learning to a whole new level. We were just pull from this hole to that hole and terminate here and turn the breaker on. That's all there was to it.
They pull out their smartphones and they're sitting around the lunch table talking about. Well, I guess because a lot of these kids are young people are going to school. They're starting to get into the point where they're trying to memorize code and that kind of stuff. They're pulling it up on their phones and they're talking to each other about it, which is fascinating. We didn't have that. We have the information is amazing.
You said, talking about dirty jobs, you said a funny thing at one of your comedy shows that stuck with me, because electricians always like to have fun with the other trades, and who better to have fun with than the plumbers? And you said you became an electrician because the smell of electricity on your hands was better than the smell of plumbing. Something along those lines anyway.
Well, I think the line is, I became an electrician because nobody calls you up in the middle of the night and says, my basement's filling up with electricity.
That's the line. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I remember that's how you said it. That's true.
Check out Jim McNally's stand-up on YouTube. If you have any comments or guest suggestions, feel free to email John Finan, john@tradeupbook.ca. And check out the book on Amazon, won't you? It would make a great gift for the young person in your life, or for a parent who thinks university is the only way to a successful life. Trade Up is available on Amazon. I'm Lisa Brandt. Thanks for your time. We're back soon with more about skilled trades.